question is, how does that cycle? I think as a culture, we totally get that cycle with illegal drugs, with alcohol, with cigarettes, and I think now we're getting it really clearly with things like opioids and other prescription medications.
Adderalls,
Xanax, all these sorts of things. But what about behaviors? What about things that don't fit those obvious substance categories? That's where the question comes in. And to be honest, it's a little frustrating being a professional because there's not a clear answer. Different research professionals look at it differently. I think we can all agree that behaviors can be impulsive and then compulsive. Mm-hmm. So we do them for fun at first, or we do them because they're interesting. Then we might get stuck in this cycle of where we compulsively or repetitively have to do something.
Would this be OCD? Does that come into play here, or is that not?
So if I were diagnosing somebody and they came in with some of these complaints, we would have to rule in or rule out OCD, which is an anxiety type disorder where you have an obsessive worry about something that creates anxiety, and then you do a compulsive behavior to reduce the anxiety. It is a false reduction because it really just reinforces that cycle of a person's life. So, the one we see in movies a lot is something like germophobia, where a person's worried about germs. They obsess about it. They repetitively wash their hands 13 magical times, and their brain says you're fine, and then they go through that cycle. We would want to say, is this really just OCD? But for some people, it's not really OCD. It seems to fit this pattern of compulsive behavior that we see in addiction with substance abuse.
Give me an example.
Well, gambling's a really good example. And in fact, it's probably the most researched behavior that can be considered an addiction.
Do you think?
And again, I know that there are going to be some people listening that are like, well, things like gambling and other behaviors, they're not true addictions. And what I'm going to say is, relax. There's a lot of research going on out there which shows that some of these things that we may have just thought were impulse control problems, when we look at the neuro research, the brain scan imaging, we're starting to find that, wow, that same reward system with dopamine is being triggered. So we can call it what we want, but it's interesting, and I love being involved at the university and doing research and reading these things because over time you start to see this evolution of our understanding. So gambling goes way back in history as something that they've recognized as a problematic behavior.
Yeah, I had an Aunt Sandy who was addicted to gambling.
Yeah.
And, some people would, even back, this was, 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
They would be like, well, is she really addicted?
Right, she could just stop, right?
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that exact same circuitry in the brain is being triggered when a person has that experience. First, they do it for fun, but then the dopamine gets released, and that fun really is exciting to a person. For some people, it's not. For me, I don't really like gambling. I'm too nervous. I'd rather think, I just lost $100. I could have had a really nice meal.
I love it.
You love gambling.
Love gambling.
I'm not surprised.
Love it.
But I'm a more of an anxious, nervous person, and that it makes me very uncomfortable. But a good story is once when I was in graduate school, we were off. All the graduate students we were presenting research, and after the research conference was over, there was a reservation casino right there, and everybody's, hey, let's go. We'll eat and we'll gamble And so I went along with the group, and everybody was giving me a hard time about not gambling. My short story was I put $20 on red, hit red, got my $40. I was done. That was my night.
Right.
But while I was sitting in there watching my friend lose his tuition money, which truly did happen that night.
I've seen it done.
Yeah. An alarm went off. It was crazy. Scared, made me jump right out of my skin until I realized it was a jackpot. And there was this little old man there. And at first he looked like he just robbed a bank. He looked guilty as sin. But he had pulled the lever, whatever you do, and hit this jackpot, and it was a big deal. Sirens were going off, flashing lights. All of a sudden, people showed up. Some lady had balloons. It was this big deal, and he had won, I don't know how much, but a large amount of money. And then he left, and so that was over with. And on the way back to the hotel, some of my friends and I were talking about what happened there. Mm-hmm. They do that on purpose in the casino, not just to advertise to other people that you can hit a jackpot, but what happens is That's very exciting. It's a party. A party just happened. A big explosion. Money was handed. Loud lights and
I want
all of
my
that
party.
stuff. Right. Everybody wants it. And what that does is that triggers that reward system in your brain. For that person, I don't know the guy, and I never followed up with him, of course, but my guess is he probably poured all that money right back in because it triggered that cycle of, oh my gosh, that was so exciting, so much fun, and I went home and I had all this money, and then he probably went right back wanting that same fix because now he was in stage 3, which is the withdrawal, the letdown. I don't have that dopamine fix anymore. It doesn't feel good. I want to go there and recapture that excitement. And we think we can think our way out of those sorts of things, but it's a lot harder, like your aunt or people that are listening to this and relate to that. You can't just think yourself out of alcoholism. You can't just think yourself out of a heroin addiction. And for a lot of people, they can't just think themselves out of, I shouldn't gamble my tuition money away.
I like what you said right there for a lot of people, because I know there's people probably listening to this right now going, what, I go to Wendover twice a year, I take $200 and it's a great time.
Right.
And if I compared that to drinkers, that would be the gentleman drinkers.
Sure.
They can go do that and have a great time, walk away and never think about it.
Right.
But if I go to a casino and I'm there to gamble.
Right, yeah. You're there for the thrill of it.
Yeah, and I'm the ups and the downs.
The ups and the downs are both right on the edge, right?
Yeah.
And that is that you're having that dopamine, that reward system experience, and your brain is likely to come back. The problem with gambling, especially if you look at the behavior, is it's called a variable rate of reinforcement. And all that means is they've done studies. If you win every single time, pretty soon your brain gets tired of it. And you're like, I've got enough, I'm going home. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
You would think you'd just stay forever. But people get full or satiated with that because you never know when it's going to hit. But when it hits, it feels so good. The lights go
Everything
off and
seems
everything.
right.
You get the big stack of chips and all that stuff. That keeps a person there, hour after hour, day after day, pouring all their money into it. They may put $10,000 in and win $2,000 back and feel like they got something.
Well, you hear it all the time. People coming home from Wendover, which is a casino just over in Nevada. They go, how did you do? Well, I lost about $100, so I'm about even.
Right.
Yeah,
which is probably a lie. But
yeah, right, yeah.
But yeah, that's that. You count that up, and it justifies going back again the next weekend.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that certain things like these behaviors can actually trigger the same neurological system that we see with drug and alcohol abuse. And some of the other things that are on that list that we will be talking about in the future, sex and sexual-related behaviors have been studied and are a big concern. Pornography is on the list.
Do you think those two go hand in hand? Poor choice of words.
It's all right. I couldn't stop laughing at that. They're related but separate. They don't have to go together. They can, for sure.
So someone could be, say, addicted just to pornography.
And not to sexual behaviors, sure. To sexual acting out, I should say.
Okay.
And some people are not really into viewing pornography, but they are into sexual behaviors. They might go to clubs and do other things.
We've been trying to get on the show someone to talk about sex addiction. Mm-hmm. And it's not as easy you would think to find somebody.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a struggle. Partly we want to have somebody on, since it's a very sensitive topic, somebody who is an expert and who can speak competently about it. Mm-hmm. So we're working on bringing in experts on sex and pornography. Another area of a lot of research recently is internet. The use of the internet, that clicking, that reward that comes from finding something new or funny or interesting, whatever your interest is, you can find it on the internet. And I remember being a kid thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could look this up or look that up? And, my dad's World Book was like from 1964.
Yeah, we had the 1974
the Beatles had just barely shown
Encyclopedia
up.
Britannica
with
only like 8 volumes. And so It was like, well, does it start with V? Can't look that up.
Yeah, we're missing that one.
Yeah.
But nowadays, anything you're interested in, people are pretty naturally curious. I mean, I don't mind saying I get stuck watching skateboard videos. Well, how cool the tricks are.
Get in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you go down that. So for some people, we may be predisposed to certain types of things triggering that system in a way that it's hard for us to turn it off. Just like in substance abuse addictions, we're finding in research that many behavioral addictions have a same method of creating tolerance and overlapping genetic contributions. So it seems some of these things like gambling and other things may run in families, that the same neurological mechanisms, that pathway is found in those behaviors, just like in substance abuse. And the response to treatment even is very similar in a lot of cases where people struggle with relapse. And so there are a lot of similarities between what we think of as traditional addiction with substances and behavioral things like gambling, sex, pornography, internet, shopping, video games, plastic surgery, and food.
You know, you said something, and I don't even know if this is, on topic, but it, where you say it's in their DNA, or like, is something a genetic trait, or is it a learned trait, or is it both? Because I'm looking at myself, and my mom and my dad, they both like to gamble.
Yeah.
They both like to drink.
Yep.
And I didn't know if I like to do those things because I saw them do it and I wanted to emulate them, or is it something that's in my DNA, or is it the compulsive and kind of the binge tendency in my DNA? Is there an answer for that?
The answer is, first of all, it's both. Most of the time we would say most things are both. We're kind of way past that conversation of, is it, learned behavior or is it biology? It's usually both with addictions. And so for you, we would say, no, there's not probably a gambling disorder gene versus an alcoholism gene. But research is defining that better all the time. We would say that because both your parents liked those things, that genetically you're at higher risk. You're biologically predisposed. I walk into a place to gamble and I feel like I don't want to be here. This is too much. I'm nervous. I'd rather go outside and hang out or eat a good meal with my $100 than throw it away.
I walk in, I say goodbye to 10 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have different predispositions of how our bodies react. But then, of course, the modeling from your parents was part of it. Your parents probably didn't model drinking was a sad affair. They probably, was associated, at least most of the time growing up, seeing parties happen and fun times. And it's a treat to go off to Nevada to gamble. Oh, we're going away for the weekend. So, yeah, there's modeling that happens. And then there's your own behavioral experience like we've been talking about where, if a person gets a boost, a dopamine boost from any particular behavior, the brain takes particular note of that. And if it might be loading on your predisposition, it might take an extra note of that. And you might say, hey, I really like that. That was fun. I want to do that again. Whereas for other people, we're not as predisposed to something, and we skip it pretty easily. If I never go to a casino again, I'll be fine.
Okay, so I'm looking at your syllabus here.
My syllabus.
And, I see video games. And video games is a weird territory because now when we were kids, video games were
pretty simple.
Moving forward. But now there's jobs for people playing video games. There's careers in the military playing video games.
I had a patient not too long ago go off to a competition for a particular video game and win a bunch of money for playing a video game.
And so I've got a son. He's 8 years old, and he's got a video game controller in his hand or an iPad in his hand almost all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out if I in my head, I know that's not healthy to have it all the time. I know that.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and your kids, to be honest, with your family history, are at higher risk for developing compulsive and addictive behaviors.
And so how do we talk about this epidemic?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, video games nowadays, to be honest, are just super cool. They're so much better than what we played. And if anything, they're becoming more like an interactive movie or story, right? Where there's, you have these open world games that never end.
Right.
Remember when you were a kid, you always needed do-overs. If Mario died too fast, you're like, can I have a do-over?
Yeah.
You have to reset because you only got 3 lives.
I saved Princess Peach. The game's over.
Yeah, but not anymore. These are open world games. The new Zelda game is a really fun, cool game. We have professional musicians doing the score and very talented artists creating
Hollywood
the
A-listers
world.
doing the voices.
Yeah. Sam Jackson's probably on one of your video games somewhere. So they're very enticing, especially to a young person. And for certain people, the dopamine rush that comes from playing these games is pretty impressive, including, I can tell you through my experience as a psychologist, many kids who struggle socially in person at school and in the neighborhood are little rock stars on a particular game because that's a social activity now. It's not just you playing your N64 in the basement by yourself anymore, but you may be in touch with people all over the country and around the world. And one mom told me not too long ago, she said we've been talking about her son who struggles socially, and she said, it was just strange. I didn't mean to eavesdrop on him, but I was coming downstairs, and I paused, and I was listening to him talk because he sounded different. I said, well, what did he sound like? She said he sounded like an expert. This kid's, 12 or 13 or something. I said, well, what was he doing? She said he was instructing this other person over the microphone on how to get through a certain part of the game and what to do. And she said he sounded like a patient professor, somebody who had expert knowledge, who was patiently tutoring somebody through this thing. And she said, I could tell he was so happy in that moment. He felt so important in that moment. And that, for sure, was a dopamine experience for that kid. Do you think he's going to want to play that again? You bet, because those social needs, which are so important at that age, aren't really getting met for him out in the world, but they are on that game. So there's a lot of factors. Parents should not just dismiss, it's just a video game. There's a lot going on there, and therefore, kids who are at risk for developing compulsive behaviors, a video game can be, like you said, a rabbit hole they go down that fills some important needs, but maybe creates this compulsive and perhaps addictive response.
Last night I had to put my dad pants on last night because so my girlfriend gave us this driveway pickleball set.
Oh, yeah.
And so I put the pickleball set together, put it on the driveway, grabbed me, Frankie, and Bowden. We went outside to play, and we were playing back and forth. And Bowden, my son, was playing with Frankie, and he just couldn't get it. And we were all trying to be supportive, and he just didn't like it and kind of just threw this little tantrum and didn't want to do it. And I was trying to be the dad. I was like, hey, bud, just keep trying. Just do this. And it wasn't going well. And he goes, I just want to play my video game. And I said, no, son, let's just keep trying. And I don't like being – I love being a dad, but I don't like, having –
You don't want to be the hard dad.
No. And I was like, well – look, you got to stay out here and we got to play this, and you can't play video games for an hour. And
whoa, laying down the law, Casey.
Yeah, but
it's hard though when your kid doesn't want to be there.
But I wanted him to experience other things because he just wants to watch other kids play video games and play video games.
Oh, that's the craziest thing. They'll sit on YouTube and watch other kids play.
And I was like, I was talking about my ex-wife. She grew up just playing with a circle and a stick.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, she must have been from, well, never mind. But your son was demonstrating what we're talking about, actually. Mm-hmm. He was, with his video games, he has a level of expertise and competency, which is important at his age.
And he's the master in the house at those games.
Oh, I'm sure. And probably amongst some of his friends and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of dopamine activity going on when he plays and he wins or he achieves or he guides somebody else through something. But out on pickleball, that was hard, and he wasn't having a positive experience. He wasn't getting that dopamine response. And so what does he want to do? Quit that, go back to the other.
Right.
And that is exactly what we're talking about. And brain research, scanning research, other types of research are really showing that this isn't just a behavior. These sorts of things are not just a behavior of choice, that they are engaging some of the same mechanisms, if not exactly the same, as we find in drug addiction that we've known for quite a few years. There are other things like binge eating, binge shopping. In fact, KSL News Radio was doing a thing recently where they were talking about people don't have enough money saved, and Debbie Dujanovic asked me to come on the show just a couple weeks ago.
The Deb and Dave show.
The Deb and Dave show, yeah. And that Dave's a funny guy.
I like him.
Yeah. And talk about how she had this binging experience in shopping where she'd been feeling low and things weren't going very well. And she went out and very uncharacteristically for Debbie, spent almost $2,000, I think, on clothing at once, just at one store. And, she said even by the time
Lululemon?
I think it was Nordstrom.
Okay.
But, the
There's no S
Lululemon,
on
that
that
would just be, no, we got to learn how to say it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I thought it was Nordstrom's.
Nordstrom's. If you have multiple Nordstrom stores, it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how that works.
She spent almost $2,000.
I think I recall that was the number. And for her, that's very unusual. She's a snappy dresser. Not saying she's not.
Right.
But all at once like that was unusual. And talked about the rush and the positive feeling she got. She'd been feeling low, anticipated going out, spending this money, spent way more than she should have, came back, and then she had the low again when she realized it wore off, and she felt kind of guilty and bad. And that can create that compulsive shopping or binge shopping experience that a lot of people have, which is really exacerbated nowadays by the internet. Because, I hate going to stores anyway. So things like, Amazon and eBay and places like that, you can go through and get that click, and it feels exciting. It's a little bit like gambling if you're on eBay and bidding for things, right? Mm-hmm. If you're on Amazon, you can find just the right thing and click and boom, and it's going to come here tomorrow and all that stuff. And then you check your credit card statement and you realize, wow, I've really overdone it, because you get caught in that loop of trying to feel good, then you feel low, then you buy, and then you feel a little boost. And over time, you develop a tolerance just like, or some people, I should say, not everybody, but people can develop a tolerance and want to use more and more. But instead of heroin, they're using Amazon.
But we give it a cute name, like retail therapy.
Yeah, it's retail addiction, really, is what it is.
But you go, this is going to make me feel good. We're going to spend it. But it's a short-term fix.
Isn't that funny? People admit it. I'm just doing retail therapy, but we kind of give it a pass. What if somebody's like, I'm just going to have a heroin day? No, nobody would give that a pass.
Or day drinking.
Yeah.
People say, hey, we're day drinking.
Yeah, we're just day drinking.
Because drinking in the day doesn't sound cool. But day drinking,
now it sounds cool.
Now it's a country song.
Yeah, probably is.
It is.
Yeah, it probably is. I believe you.
No, it is.
Okay.
All
right.
But I think we do that. I used to do that in my addiction. Is
justification's a huge part of all of this. Yeah. And we're so good at justifying unhealthy behaviors. And what I've found from our Facebook response is that, there are a lot of people out there who really are starting to wake up to their own behavior and realize this may be a problem for me. We've had some response on food and binge eating. Mm-hmm. That's been one we've gotten quite a bit of. We've had some real questions about mostly wives asking about their husband's video game playing and is it a problem.
We've also had a lot of people on our Facebook page mentioning they're going through a recovery with a loved one, mm-hmm. and they want to know their boundaries and they want to know what to expect. And, I'm not the only one going through this recovery of myself. My girlfriend is. She's going through it with me. Her family's going through it with me. My kids are going through it with me. My coworkers are going through it with me. And there's not a playbook really to tell everybody what to do, what they can, and when they shouldn't. And so we want our Facebook page to be a resource for everybody to come and have an open conversation and ask questions. And if we don't know the answers, we'll try to steer you in the right direction. So we really want you to go there. Like we just put a post up the other day on our Facebook page, and we wanted to know, I'll read the post to you. If my internet will come up. It goes, our recent conversation with Brandon Allen from the Facebook group Addicted We Stand is all about finding the appropriate resources someone might need on their road to recovery. Comment below if you have an opinion or possibly a better way to get resources out there to help anyone in need. And here are just some of the responses that we've received. And, it's starting to do fairly well, and we want this to be a resource as well. Let's see. Depends on the person. If you were high or drunk, you need the willing to do whatever it takes to get to stay or clean sober. That probably wasn't the best one to read because I didn't even get it out.
Out of all of the ones, that was the most confusing.
Right? Well, I'm doing this on the fly. This is a live show.
This is a live show.
Let's see. How about this one? I think the resources are there. The problem is people can't afford them. If you're homeless and have the time, you can't afford to go to a recovery facility because more than likely you don't have insurance or an income. And if you have a family and a job, again, you can't afford it. Who will pay your mortgage, utilities, and child care?
Well, and those are things you're struggling with, right? Like the limitation on your ability to get back to work and to struggle with paying for that and paying for the treatment is a different, expense. I mean, they're just the expenses start to pile up. What we want to do, and what some of our listeners who've commented and asked these questions, I appreciate that, and let's have those questions keep coming. We are currently compiling a list of options in our area where people can go for low cost or no cost sliding scale fees, people who have limited insurance or no insurance. Not that we're endorsing any of those in particular, but just that we want to make those options all compiled in one area. And so that'll be coming soon on our Facebook.
You know, one of the biggest things I'm dealing with on my recovery is the guilt associated with it.
Yeah?
That I have to take all these people along this ride with me that didn't have a choice.
Like your family and friends?
Family,
like
friends, girlfriends, coworkers, and everybody. That's the one thing that I'm still struggling with, is that everybody's so good to me and everybody's been so accommodating and forthright and trying to help me. And they're doing it because out of the goodness out of their heart, and I know that they love me. But it's still hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel guilty because...
Well, what I know about you before all of this happened last year is you're a very independent person who wasn't, inclined to ask people for help. And now you're in a difficult position. I think it's a position that actually stops a lot of people from getting help. Their pride, not a bad pride, but a good pride in yourself. If you need help, it's hard to ask for it.
And I didn't ask for it, and now I'm asking for it. Does that make
Yeah.
And if I would have asked it,
so how are you going to pay everybody back? What
not
are you
with
going to
alcohol.
do? No, I don't think that would be appropriate.
So,
well, all these people love you.
So
They're helping you.
I'll be real with you.
Okay.
So yesterday, I'm trying to figure out a way to get a license because I need to figure out a way to get around and help provide for my family, and I'm just barely scraping by right now. And so I needed a ride to the DMV to go see if I could talk to somebody if there's anything I could do. And the only person I could get a hold of was my ex-wife. And so I called her, and throughout this whole ordeal, I have never really have said sorry. I've said, hey, thank you, I appreciate it, you've been really good, but I never really said sorry.
Never had a real conversation with her about that.
So she took me to two DMVs, and as we're driving back, I said, hey, look, I want to tell you I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for everything. And I said, the problem with saying sorry is that I know it doesn't do anything. I'll never be able to say sorry enough. And you asked me how I'm going to pay back everybody. The only way I can think to pay back everybody is make a difference. And that's what I want to do, is become the person that I've always wanted to be, who I always thought I could be, and do that. So that's the way I plan on repaying everybody back, is just making a difference in this world and leaving it a better place. And I think that's all I can do, because monetary is not going to do anything.
And nobody wants that.
And words are just words unless there's actions behind them.
But how did your ex-wife respond to that apology?
She said thanks. And she ended it by going, I'm glad I can call you a friend. And before this DUI,
nice.
We weren't friends.
Yeah, well, you were divorced.
Yeah.
And that's hard to be friends when you're divorced
and
sometimes.
it wasn't good at all. So the fact that she goes, I'm glad I can call you a friend, was huge. And so that's how.
So she sensed the authenticity in your apology. But I agree, and I kind of figured you'd go down that road of, there isn't a way to pay people back, and nobody who's been helpful to you really wants to be paid back. They are doing it out of the goodness of their heart because they love you and they're your friend, and hopefully any of us, hopefully we have those sorts of people in our lives when we need them. But the way we pay people back, I think, is by being there for them, becoming a better person. I think, if your friends and family know that helping you in this process means you are going to continue to grow as a person, become that person you know that you could be, then that's a pay it back, pay it forward, however you want to think of it.
Another thing that we like to do in the recovery world is give back.
And that's been my favorite of all the guests we've had. My favorite part is listening to that last part of the interview where they talk about how they are giving back, what they're trying to do for others.
Because somebody picked up the phone when I called, somebody was there when I needed it, and whether you know it or not, it meant the world. It meant the world.
Yeah.
Because you felt so alone and you didn't feel worth it and you didn't think anybody cared or anybody wanted to help. Now, that wasn't the reality, but that's how you felt in your mind, and that's how you had lied to yourself.
That's what addiction does to your self-esteem.
That's what it does.
Yeah.
And so when you do reach out and somebody's there, whoa.
It's huge.
So that's what we do in the recovery world.
Yeah.
We give back, and that's why we want to do on this podcast.
Well, that's what you just shared. You shared with me months ago. That's what hooked me into wanting to come do this podcast with you.
So I guess in closing, we want everybody to know that this Facebook page and this podcast is for you. It's for everybody out there. If you're suffering and you need something, reach out and ask. And if we can't help, we'll kind of put you in the right direction and see what we can do. And we appreciate you taking time to download this podcast, to rate it, to review it, to share it, and to listen.
Yeah, we really appreciate the great response. Hopefully today we've talked a little bit about how addiction works in general, and I know you and I are both excited to expand beyond just the substance abuse disorders and move into some things that affect a lot of other people and try to educate all of us and find resources on the behavioral addictions that are so prevalent in our culture.
All right, so thank you for listening to Project Recovery. If you know somebody who needs some help, do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery a call. Thanks so much for listening. Tilton, thank you for running the board. Dr. Matt, always a pleasure. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.